The radio was playing some forgettable pop song when I turned onto Maple Street. My mind was already shifting from work mode to home mode, the way it did every evening at 6:47 p.m. 14 years of the same commute had trained my body to relax as I approached our quiet suburban neighborhood. Shoulders dropping, jaw unclenching, the day's warehouse tensions bleeding away with each familiar landmark. But tonight the street was wrong. Red and blue lights strobed against the twilight sky, painting our neighbors' pristine lawns in harsh emergency colors. Police cars lined the curb like a military convoy, their radios crackling with static and coded numbers I couldn't decipher. An ambulance sat in the middle of the street, rear doors flung wide, paramedics moving with urgent efficiency around a stretcher. My house. Our house was the center of it all. Yellow tape fluttered around our property like party streamers from hell. A uniformed officer stood guard by our front gate, arms crossed, face impassive. On the curb, where visitors usually parked, a luxury sedan was engulfed in orange flames, black smoke billowing into the darkening sky, while firefighters aimed their hoses at the inferno. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, muscle memory operating while my brain struggled to process the scene. This had to be some mistake, some accident involving our neighbors that just happened to spill onto our property. Claire was probably inside watching through the curtains, as shaken and confused as I was. The officer by the gate stepped forward as I approached, one hand resting casually on his belt. "Sir, you need to stay back from the scene." I pulled out my wallet to show him my license. "This is my house. Jason Miller. I live here. What happened? Is my wife okay?" The officer studied my ID with more attention than seemed necessary, comparing my face to the photo twice. "She's inside, sir. Detective Morrison will want to speak with you." He led me past the tape, and I caught a glimpse of the paramedics loading someone into the ambulance. A man, face injured and unconscious, wearing an expensive suit that was now torn and stained. I'd never seen him before in my life. Detective Morrison appeared beside me, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog my every reaction. "Do you know this individual, Mr. Miller?" "Number never seen him. Who is he? What happened here?" She didn't answer directly. "Where have you been this evening, sir?" The questions felt surreal, like being asked to prove my innocence of something I didn't even understand yet. "Work. Riverside Logistics. I manage the evening shift prep crew. I left at 6:30, same as always. There's cameras, time cards, witnesses." She was writing in a small notebook, not looking at me. "We'll need those details." Then she continued, "Your wife says this man was a friend who came by unexpectedly. Says someone attacked him outside your house and set his car on fire. Any idea who might want to do something like that?" The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. Claire had never mentioned having male friends I didn't know. In 12 years of marriage, she'd never had unexpected visitors of any kind. She was too particular about the house being clean, too scheduled in her routines. I don't understand. Claire doesn't really have friends over without planning it days in advance. She's very organized about social things. Detective Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Organized. She likes to prepare, cook special meals, clean the house thoroughly. Having someone just drop by would stress her out. Even as I said it, I realized how odd it sounded, like I was describing a stranger instead of my wife. "And you have no idea who might have a grudge against you? Anyone who might want to send you a message by attacking a visitor to your home?" The implication hit me like cold water. They thought I did this. They thought I came home, found some man at my house, and beat him unconscious before torching his car. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if not for the detective's completely serious expression. "Detective, I've been at work since 2 o'clock this afternoon. I supervise a crew of 8 guys who can verify that. I've got time cards, security footage, probably 20 witnesses who saw me on the warehouse floor when this happened." She nodded, making more notes. "We'll need to verify all of that, of course. In the meantime, I need you to understand that this is an active crime scene. We'll need to process the house and surrounding area." "Can I see Claire?" For the first time, Morrison's expression softened slightly. She's pretty shaken up. Says she's never seen anything like this before. I followed her inside, past more officers taking photographs and collecting evidence. Our living room had been turned into an interview station with notebooks and recording equipment spread across Claire's antique coffee table. The air smelled like smoke from the burning car outside. Claire sat on our couch wrapped in a police blanket, her makeup streaked down her cheeks, hands trembling as she held a cup of coffee. When she saw me, fresh tears started flowing. "Jason, oh God, it was so horrible." I sat beside her instinctively, reaching out to comfort her. But something in her posture made me pause. She was shaking, yes. But there was something else in her expression. Something that looked almost like guilt. "What happened, honey? Who was that man?" She spoke quickly, too quickly. "I don't know. I mean, he was just a friend. Someone I met at the gym. David something. He stopped by to see if we wanted to join his book club." A book club? Claire hadn't read anything longer than a magazine article in the entire time I'd known her. Detective Morrison was watching our interaction carefully, taking notes about our body language, our words, the way Claire avoided eye contact when she spoke. I could feel the weight of their suspicions settling around me like a net. And the worst part was that I couldn't even blame them. If I were investigating this scene, I'd suspect the husband too. "The fire department has the car fire under control," Morrison said. "We'll need to keep the scene cordoned off overnight while our forensics team processes everything. Mr. Miller, you're free to enter your home, but please understand that you remain a person of interest in this investigation." A person of interest. The phrase echoed in my head as the detective gathered her equipment and prepared to leave. Outside, the ambulance was pulling away with its broken passenger, and the fire department was hosing down the smoldering remains of the luxury sedan. I was free to enter my own home, but nothing would ever be the same. The front door closed behind the last police officer at 11:30 p.m., leaving Claire and me alone in our house for the first time since the chaos began. The silence felt heavier than the earlier commotion. No radios crackling, no boots on hardwood floors, no authoritative voices discussing evidence and witness statements. Just my wife and me and the elephant in the room that was growing larger by the minute. Claire had shed the police blanket and was now pacing between the kitchen and living room, wringing her hands and muttering fragments of sentences. "I can't believe this happened. Poor David. Who would do such a thing?" David. She'd said his name 3 times now, each time with a familiarity that contradicted her claim of barely knowing him. My voice came out calmer than I felt, carrying the same tone I used at work when dealing with problem employees. "Sit down, Claire. We need to talk." She perched on the edge of our leather armchair, the one that faced away from the couch. The first time I could remember her choosing not to sit beside me when we were alone. Her mascara had been repaired sometime during the police interviews, but her lipstick was completely gone, and I found myself wondering when exactly she'd lost it. "Tell me about David." "I already told you. And the police. He's just someone from the gym who—" "What's his last name?" The question hung in the air. Claire's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her eyes darting toward the window where the burnt car's skeleton was still visible in the streetlight. "Davidson." "What gym?" "What?" "You've belonged to Fitness Plus for 3 years. I've picked you up there dozens of times. Which trainer is David? What classes does he teach?" Her face was crumbling now, the careful composure she'd maintained for the police dissolving into something raw and desperate. "He's not a trainer. He's just a member who—" "Claire." I leaned forward, keeping my voice level. "I've seen the credit card statements. You haven't been to the gym in 6 months." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Claire's breathing became shallow and quick, like she was having a panic attack. "Jason, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I've been trying to understand this evening and nothing makes sense. A stranger shows up at our house, A stranger driving a $60,000 BMW gets beaten half to death in our driveway. His car gets torched. The police think I did it, and my wife claims she barely knows the victim. The words exploded out of her, high-pitched and desperate. I don't know who hurt him. I was inside when it happened. I heard shouting and glass breaking, and when I looked out the window, David was on the ground and his car was on fire. I called 911 immediately. What was he doing here, Claire? She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly. He wanted to talk about things, personal things. The truth was there in the spaces between her words, in the way she couldn't meet my eyes, in the guilty slump of her shoulders. My wife, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 12 years, who knew how I liked my coffee and which side of the sink I preferred to shave at, had been entertaining another man in our home. The rage that swept through me was clean and cold, like stepping into an Arctic wind. Not the hot, explosive anger of a moment, but something deeper and more permanent. A fundamental shift in how I saw Claire, our marriage, the last decade of my life. How long? Jason, please! How long have you been having a relationship with him? Her face crumpled completely, tears flowing freely as the last of her lies fell away. 6 months, but it didn't mean anything. It was just, I was lonely and you work so much and he made me feel… Get out. I stood up, my movements deliberate and controlled. Get out of my sight. Go pack whatever you need for tonight. You're sleeping in the guest room. Jason, we can work through this. I made a mistake, but I love you. I choose you. David was just what, Claire? Just a mistake that required 6 months of lying to my face? Just a mistake that brought police to our door and made me a suspect in a violent crime? She reached for me, her hands grasping at my sleeve. Please, baby. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll never see him again. I'll do anything to make this right. I looked down at her hands on my arm, the same hands that had touched another man in our home, the same hands that had removed her wedding ring at some point this evening and hastily put it back on before the police arrived. The evidence was there in the slight indentation on her finger, the tan line that didn't quite match. I'm calling Patricia in the morning. I'm enforcing every clause of our prenup. You signed it, Claire. You agreed that infidelity would result in forfeiture of spousal support, division of assets, everything. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly, looking like she might collapse. Then, without another word, she walked upstairs. I heard her moving around in our bedroom, opening drawers and closets, the sound of clothes being stuffed into a suitcase. I remained in the living room, staring out at the charred remains of her lover's car. The police had covered it with a tarp, but the shape was unmistakable, a monument to the destruction of my marriage. 20 minutes later, Claire came back downstairs carrying an overnight bag and a pillow. She paused at the guest room door, looking back at me with red, swollen eyes. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. And now we both have to live with the consequences. The guest room door closed with a soft click. Within minutes, I could hear her crying, deep, wrenching sobs that carried through the walls. I went upstairs to our bedroom, where the scent of her perfume still lingered on the sheets. For the first time in years, I had the entire king-size bed to myself. I lay on my back, hands behind my head, staring at the ceiling and thinking about logistics. Divorce papers, asset protection, the security cameras at work that would clear me of any police suspicion. Down the hall, Claire's crying gradually subsided into hiccuping silence. I slept better than I had in months. Patricia Hendris had the kind of office that intimidated people into honesty. Floor-to-ceiling law books, diplomas from prestigious universities, and a view of downtown that screamed success. She'd been practicing family law for 25 years, and her reputation for crafting ironclad prenuptial agreements was legendary in our social circle. She was flipping through the files she'd pulled from her cabinet. I remember this case. Your wife's attorney tried to get her out of signing it 3 different times. I sat across from Patricia's mahogany desk, wearing my best suit and carrying a manila folder full of documentation. She signed it anyway, and now I need to enforce it. Patricia read aloud, Adultery Clause, Section 4. In the event that either party engages in extramarital sexual relations, the offending party forfeits all rights to spousal support, marital property division, and shared assets acquired during the marriage. She looked up at me over her reading glasses. You have proof of the affair? I slid a flash drive across her desk. Police report from Tuesday night. Statement from my wife admitting to a 6-month relationship with the victim. Credit card records showing hotel charges, restaurant bills, gifts I never received. Patricia plugged in the drive and spent several minutes reviewing the files, making occasional notes on a legal pad. The police report was particularly damning. Claire's own words, given under official questioning, admitting to the relationship with David Davidson. This is textbook infidelity under the terms of your agreement, Patricia said finally. But Jason, I need to ask, did you have anything to do with what happened to this man? I was at work from 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday. Security footage, time cards, 8 witnesses. The police have already verified my alibi. Good, because if there's any hint that you orchestrated violence against your wife's lover, it could complicate the divorce proceedings. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. Are you sure you want to go through with this? No reconciliation attempts? The question struck me as almost absurd. Patricia, she's been lying to my face for 6 months. She brought another man into our home, into our bed. She exposed me to legal liability and police suspicion. What exactly would I be reconciling with? Some people consider infidelity a mistake that can be forgiven. Some people are fools. Patricia smiled grimly. Fair enough. I'll file the papers this afternoon. Under the terms of your prenup, Claire will have 7 days to vacate the marital home and 30 days to secure her own legal representation. She keeps her personal belongings, her car, and that's it. Everything else, the house, investments, retirement accounts, remains yours. How long until it's final? 6 to 8 weeks, assuming she doesn't contest it. Though given the strength of this prenup and the evidence of adultery, any attorney worth their fee will advise her to accept the terms. I left Patricia's office feeling lighter than I had in years. The morning sun seemed brighter, traffic moved more smoothly, and even the elevator music in my building sounded less irritating. For the first time since Tuesday night, I had a clear path forward. Claire was waiting when I got home, sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an expression of forced optimism. She'd done her hair and makeup carefully, wearing the blue dress I'd once said was my favorite. The desperate attempt at normalcy was almost pathetic. I made dinner reservations at Romano's for tonight, 7:30. I thought we could really talk about fixing this. I set my briefcase on the counter and loosened my tie. Cancel them. Jason, please. I know you're angry, but we can work through this. I've already called Dr. Ethan about couples counseling. She has an opening next week. Claire, stop. The papers were in my briefcase, signed and notarized, ready to be served. But looking at her sitting there in that blue dress, desperately trying to salvage what she'd already destroyed, I felt something close to pity. You need to call a lawyer, today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Her face went pale. What are you talking about? I filed for divorce this morning. The papers will be served tomorrow. The coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. Hot liquid splashed across the tile, and she stared down at the mess like she couldn't understand how it had happened. You can't be serious, Jason. I made one mistake. You made the same mistake every day for 6 months. She was crying again, but these weren't the broken sobs from Tuesday night. These were angry tears, desperate and manipulative. Fine, divorce me. But you can't just throw me out with nothing. I gave you the best years of my life. You gave me 12 years of lies, and according to our prenup, infidelity means you get nothing. The transformation was instantaneous. The tears stopped. Her face hardened, and for a moment, I saw the person she really was underneath all the performance. You bastard, you planned this. I planned for the possibility that you might turn out to be exactly who you are. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'll fight this. I'll contest everything. No judge will enforce that ridiculous prenup. Good luck. Patricia Hendress thinks otherwise. The name recognition hit her immediately. Patricia had a reputation in our social circle, and Claire knew exactly what it meant that I'd retained her services. I need time to think. This is all happening too fast. Take all the time you need. You have 7 days to move out. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the banister. What about the police investigation? What if they arrest you? They won't. My alibi is solid. But what if… Claire, I didn't hurt your boyfriend, but I'm not going to let his problems become my problems any longer than they already have. She went upstairs without another word. An hour later, I heard her on the phone, probably calling her sister or her mother, spinning some version of events that painted her as the victim. Let her. By tomorrow, the whole story would be academic. I ordered Chinese takeout and ate dinner alone at the kitchen table, reading through Patricia's preliminary asset inventory. The house, the investments, the retirement accounts, all of it would remain mine, just as we'd agreed 12 years ago when Claire had been so eager to marry me that she'd signed anything I put in front of her. That night, I slept in our bed while Claire remained in the guest room. Through the walls, I could hear her making phone calls, her voice alternating between tears and anger as she tried to find someone who would tell her what she wanted to hear. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did contracts. In a few weeks, I would be free of her completely, with my assets intact and my conscience clear. It was the best night's sleep I'd had in years. The police station interview room was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, metal table, chairs that had seen better decades. Detective Morrison sat across from me with a thick file and a tape recorder, going through my timeline for the 3rd time in 4 days. So you left work at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, she said, consulting her notes. Your supervisor confirms this. Security footage shows you badging out at 6:32 p.m. That's right. Drive straight home? Straight home. Same route I take every day. She flipped through several pages. We've verified your work attendance, spoken to your crew, reviewed the warehouse security footage. Everything checks out. I maintained the same calm expression I'd worn since this whole thing started. I hope that helps clear things up. It does, actually. We're no longer considering you a person of interest in Mr. Davidson's incident. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. That's good to hear. Any leads on who actually did it? Detective Morrison closed the file and turned off the recorder. Between you and me, Mr. Miller, crimes like this usually fall into 2 categories: random violence, which this clearly wasn't, or personal disputes. Given that Mr. Davidson was visiting your wife and someone beat him unconscious in your driveway, she let the implication hang in the air. You think this was about Claire? I think your wife hasn't been entirely forthcoming about the nature of her relationship with the victim, but that's not your problem anymore, is it? I could hear the knowledge of the divorce proceedings in her voice. Word traveled fast in a town this size, especially when Patricia Hendress was involved. It's not my problem anymore. Walking out of the police station felt like emerging from a tunnel. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and I had nowhere to be except home. The investigation was closed as far as I was concerned, and Claire's problems were rapidly becoming someone else's responsibility. But as I drove through town, my mind drifted back to Tuesday evening. Not the sanitized version I'd given the police, but what had really happened. I had left work at exactly 6:30 p.m. just as I'd told them, but I hadn't driven straight home. Instead, I'd taken a detour past my house first, something I'd been doing for weeks whenever I noticed that unfamiliar BMW in my driveway during lunch breaks. I'd seen it there 3 times in the past month, always parked in the same spot where visitors usually parked. That Tuesday, driving by at 5:45 p.m., I saw it again. Davidson's BMW, sitting in my driveway like it belonged there. I parked 4 blocks away and walked back, letting myself in through the basement door with practiced silence. The sounds from upstairs confirmed what I'd suspected for weeks. Claire's laughter, intimate and genuine, in a way I hadn't heard in years. The voice of a man I'd never met, speaking to my wife with casual familiarity. I waited in the basement for over an hour, listening to them move around my house, sitting on my furniture, probably drinking from my liquor cabinet. The rage building slowly, methodically, like pressure in a boiler. Watching through the basement window as Davidson finally left around 7:15 p.m., confident and relaxed, checking his phone as he walked to his car. A handsome man in an expensive suit, carrying himself like someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. Following him outside with the Louisville Slugger, feeling it perfectly balanced in my hands. The ski mask I'd grabbed from our winter sports equipment pulled down over my face. Davidson's surprise turning to fear as he realized what was happening. The first swing connecting with his ribs, the second with his shoulder. The systematic, methodical beating that followed, each impact calculated to cause maximum pain without permanent disability. The satisfaction of seeing him crumpled on my driveway, finally understanding that actions have consequences. The gasoline from our lawnmower, the matches from our emergency kit, the BMW's leather interior catching fire with surprising speed, stripping off the mask and gloves, washing my hands in the basement sink, changing clothes, hiding the evidence in the workshop, then driving around the block and returning home at exactly 6:47 p.m. to discover the scene. My Oscar-worthy performance of confusion and concern as the police arrived. The memory brought a smile to my lips as I pulled into my driveway. The burnt skeleton of Davidson's car had been towed away, leaving only a black stain on the asphalt where it had sat. Claire's car was gone too, probably at her sister's house where she'd been staying since the divorce papers were served. Inside, the house felt different, cleaner, quieter, more like it had belonged to me all along instead of being a shared space where I was merely tolerated. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, the one Claire had always complained about. Through the living room window, I could see Mrs. Patterson from next door working in her garden, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of the neighborhood's latest drama. Let her look. The police investigation was closed. My marriage was ending on my terms, and Davidson would spend the next several months learning to walk without a limp. The bourbon tasted like victory. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Please call me. We need to talk about the house." I deleted the message without responding. We'd done enough talking. Now it was time for her to learn what the rest of her life would look like. 2 weeks after the divorce papers were finalized, I stood in my kitchen making coffee for one and watching the morning news. The weather report promised another beautiful day. Sunny, mild, perfect for the golf game I'd scheduled with my buddy Mike from work. Claire had moved out completely the day before, taking only what the prenup allowed her to keep. Her car, her clothes, her jewelry, and the bitter realization of what her choices had cost her. The house felt enormous without her presence, but in the best possible way, like stretching out after being cramped in a small space for years. The local news segment mentioned Davidson's recovery. He'd been released from the hospital with a walking cast and several pins in his ribs, facing months of physical therapy. The police had officially closed the case, citing lack of evidence and suspects. The reporter mentioned that it was likely a random act of violence, possibly a robbery gone wrong. I smiled into my coffee mug. Mike picked me up at 9, and we spent the morning at Riverside Country Club, where I'd maintained my membership throughout the marriage, despite Claire's complaints about the expense. She'd always seen it as frivolous, but now I understood it had been an investment in my post-divorce social life. As we walked to the 10th tee, Mike said, "You seem different. Lighter, I guess. 12 years of dead weight will do that to a man. Any regrets?" I considered the question as I lined up my shot. About the divorce? None. About waiting this long to do it? Plenty. The ball sailed straight and true, landing exactly where I'd aimed. Everything in my life felt that precise now. Controlled, intentional, mine. We had lunch at the clubhouse where several acquaintances stopped by our table to offer condolences about my marriage and congratulations about my freedom. Word had gotten around about Claire's affair and the terms of our divorce. In our social circle, adultery was still considered a serious breach of trust, and the consensus seemed to be that I'd handled the situation with appropriate dignity. Over his sandwich, Mike said, "I heard she's staying with her parents temporarily. The prenup gave her 60 days to find permanent housing." "That's rough. That's consequences." Mike nodded approvingly. He'd been through his own messy divorce 5 years earlier, but without the protection of a prenup. His ex-wife had taken half of everything and still collected alimony. "You always were the smart one," he said. That afternoon, I came home to a house that was entirely my own. No compromises on furniture placement, no arguments about the thermostat, no need to accommodate anyone else's schedule or preferences. I could eat what I wanted, watch what I wanted, go to bed when I wanted. The freedom was intoxicating. I'd heard through mutual friends that Claire was struggling, living with her parents at 34, facing the reality of rebuilding her life from scratch, with no financial cushion and a reputation damaged by her affair. Some of our former friends had expressed sympathy for her situation, but most had sided with me once the full story came out. Davidson, according to the same gossip network, had ended their relationship immediately after getting out of the hospital. Apparently, the reality of being beaten nearly to death had cooled his enthusiasm for sleeping with married women. I felt no guilt about any of it. Claire had made her choices and Davidson had made his. I'd simply ensured that those choices carried appropriate consequences. That evening, I made myself a perfect dinner. Steak cooked exactly how I liked it. Wine from the bottle Claire had always said was too expensive for weeknight drinking. Dessert I didn't have to share. I ate slowly, savoring each bite and the silence that surrounded me. As I was cleaning up, my phone rang. Claire's number appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she wanted to say, I wasn't interested in hearing it. Our business was concluded. The voicemail was 3 minutes of tears and pleading, asking for another chance, promising she'd learned her lesson, begging me to reconsider the divorce terms. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. At 10 o'clock, I went upstairs to my bedroom, not our bedroom, just mine now, and got ready for sleep. The king-size bed stretched out before me like an ocean of possibility. I could sleep diagonally if I wanted to, or spread out like a starfish, or pile all the pillows on one side. Instead, I lay on my back in the center of the bed, hands behind my head, and stared at the ceiling. The house was perfectly quiet, except for the subtle sounds of settling wood and the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. No crying from the guest room, no passive-aggressive sighs about something I'd supposedly done wrong. No pretending to be asleep when Claire wanted to discuss her feelings about our relationship. Just peace. I thought about Davidson, probably lying in his own bed with his injuries throbbing, wondering who had beaten him and why. I thought about Claire, crying into her childhood pillow, while her parents whispered about what a disappointment she'd become. I thought about the life I was going to build from here, travel, hobbies, maybe eventually dating someone who understood loyalty and commitment. The future stretched ahead of me like an open road. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into its nightly rhythm. Dogs being walked, porch lights turning on, families going through their bedtime routines, normal people living normal lives, most of them never having to deal with the kind of betrayal I'd endured. But I'd handled it perfectly, methodically, with the same attention to detail I brought to everything else in my life. The police investigation was closed. The divorce was final. My assets were protected. My reputation was intact. Justice had been served on my terms, and the future belonged entirely to me. I closed my eyes and drifted into the deep, dreamless sleep of a man with a clear conscience and no regrets whatsoever.